Alright, guys. After the last live stream, I've had a few people come to me and, well, even during the live stream, some of the people were like astounded by my take. And I find that strange. So, I kind of want to discuss this, and of course, there's going to be people that will be offended by this because the moment I bring up like the morality of the subject, you're if you believe in the things that I'm talking about, you're going to automatically defend yourself. It's human nature. You're going to take your identity and it's going to do everything it can to perform mental gymnastics to make things seem good, so to speak. But it is what it is. I don't lie. I don't dress things up. Well, I do dress things up sometimes to be polite, but sometimes it's necessary to just fucking get to the point, I guess. So, on the concept of, quote, slut shaming, it's a misnomer. It's like propaganda in itself, just that it's called that. In my opinion, it's similar to fat shaming. I'm not saying it's perfectly analogous, but it's similar in certain ways. Say, I actually have this exact example. And don't get me wrong, because fat shaming is a thing, but people misuse it. So, I have a relative, yeah, that went to a doctor that also happened to be my doctor at the time. Very great, excellent doctor, very professional, polite, and takes his job very seriously. She is overweight, to say it politely. Um, he basically told her so, and he explained the various dangers that that entails. And she basically got offended and like turned it into he's a terrible doctor, he fat shamed me. So that's kind of your job as a doctor. You are not doing your job if you're like, oh, everybody's perfectly great, no matter what size and shape, and it has no effect on your health, etc. Like, that's retarded. That's like, it's like lying in the service of being polite. But being polite does not make you good. Not if the harmful effects outweigh the positive. And in this case, that's definitely the case. Obesity is like the number one health issue in the United States right now. It kills more people than cigarettes and alcohol combined. It's huge. And you can't, with very few exceptions, there are very tiny little minority cases where they have like, what's that fucking word? I can't stand it when I can't think of a word. It's a simple one. Thyroid issues, or there's a couple of other things that can happen that makes it basically to where they don't really have an option. And those are very rare. And it's funny that like a vast proportion, or at least a high majority, in my experience, people that are obese claim that they have those problems when it's just not feasible. It's not true. That's bullshit. It's like mental gymnastics. So sometimes you need a dose of reality. Sometimes you need to be told what you are and why you're being unhealthy. Now, the reason why I said that there is such thing as fat shaming is there are people that are just toxic pieces of shit that just want to be assholes just for the sake of being an asshole. Like they just go out in public and they see someone fat and they're like, "You're a fat ass" or something like that. Like there's no positive intent at all. That's different. So I look at slut shaming, quote unquote, in a similar way. So the moment you call it slut shaming, you implicitly are stating, without even having to do so, that there's nothing wrong with being a slut. And that's simply wrong. That's simply like absolutely untrue for various reasons. So what you I think a lot of people like to make this claim that like your sexuality is on an island. It does not affect any other social shit at all. It's just like it's kind of like your mechanical robots, and like you have a sex drive and you just go to random people and fuck with no strings attached, and uh, there's no ramifications for that. That's not true psychologically. It tends to cause harm to people even if they don't realize it, and it causes massive social issues, like even outside of that, and we're seeing a whole lot of that in society today. So a lot of people will try to straw man me the moment I bring this up, and they'll be like, "Damn, dude, you're like a fucking one of those hardcore, like ultra controlling, like if you show like your fucking arm or something, like that's fucking stupid. Like, don't like if you disagree with me, at least be logical and take the premises that I use and try to refute them. Don't try to straw man me. That's sad. That just shows that you have no ammunition logically. So, yeah, that's not me. In fact, I don't even control at all, even in relationships. If I believe that my significant other is, quote, advertising, I don't tell them like I don't like engage in domestic abuse or whatever. I'm just done. I'm just like, well, you're not my type. I feel like I can't trust you, etc. That's it. I have standards. There's there and there would be something wrong if I didn't do that. It would mean that I have like no self-esteem, that I don't understand the implications of those actions, or that I lie to myself and act like it's nothing, like it's liberation, it's wanting to be beautiful, all this bullshit that people say. It's just not true. It's advertising. That's all it is. It's obvious. It shouldn't require like I shouldn't have to go into detail about why that's the case. It's very obvious. So there is no fucking ultra controlling. It's not like I like require them to wear hijabs and shit. That's fucking ridiculous. So, with that being said, as I already mentioned, I do have standards and I have certain expectations of my significant other. Now, a lot of people are like, well, it doesn't matter because you're not with, you're like currently single or whatever. It doesn't mean that you just throw it completely away, because every action that a person does has a reason, a root. There's intent there. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. So if you, like, for example, let's say that you have two women. One goes to bars and, like, wears extremely short skirts and really skimpy clothing, flirts with various men to garner attention. Now, oftentimes this is due to some sort of daddy issues or some sort of trauma in the past, and I realize that, and I'm not talking shit about that. But the answer is not to just act like everything's cool, because it's not, and it doesn't help them in any way. Anyhow, jumping around. So you've got that person, and then you've got a person that is more reserved. They're they seem to be directly interested in you, even if like most relationships start as friendships. So they're you're when you do this, you are even like maybe not even intentionally, you're subconsciously evaluating. At least if you're on the market or even considering it. This is how it works. So if you have a person that's just like you have shared interests, but they don't seem to go out of their way to like advertise themselves, so to speak, to the opposite sex, if you are a person, if you're a dude of quality, a dude that is like a quote catch in the eyes of most women, you're going to evaluate that and you're going to take the second person 9 times out of 10. And the reason is because you're not just after sex. That's not all it is. If you're just after sex, you won't give a shit. You'll be like, "Oh yeah, show me that booty, baby." Oh yeah. Like that's typical, and to be honest, that's probably a majority of men. So a lot of times that fools women into thinking that that's what men want. uh, but there's a reason why there's a appeal to the majority fallacy. Like what most people in a specific gender think is not representative of all of them, and there's oftentimes reasons for it. Men in general are designed, and I don't mean that as in a creator, just to get that out of the way, to to be hardwired for mainly to be at least more aesthetically driven than women in general. Things are kind of changing in that regard as of late, but it's still the case, at least to some extent. So, oftentimes they're kind of like I hate to say it, they're like retarded. Their brains go completely offline. They're in like thinking with their other head, so to speak, mode. When that happens, they're like driven entirely by their base instincts or carnal desire, whatever you want to call it. They don't think of implication. They don't care. They just want to fuck. That's it. Or they just want to see boobs, whatever it happens to be at the time that's driving them. It's still the same end goal. It's still that evolutionary drive to procreate. And sometimes they'll just use that drive in order to just get their rocks off, so to speak, even though when they don't actually want children or anything. And that's perfectly fine. But the issue is there's massive social ramifications for this and psychological. It's one of the reasons, in my opinion, that we're in such a massive, like, both male and female loneliness epidemic right now. Because we've turned sex into it's nothing. It's like, who cares? It's another base drive. It's like blowing your nose or something. You just get it out of the way, and just like two people are like mutually just doing so casually, and that means it's okay. No, it's not, and it causes serious harm. We see this again and again and again in the literature. It's just how it is. So when you don't allow your fucking horny drive to just automatically take over, you keep your logic intact. You think of the implications of your actions. It's why, for me personally, I have never, ever engaged in casual sex, and I never will. Because it fucks your through neuroplasticity. Your actions cause you to change the way you view the particular topic. You start thinking of it as just it's like masturbating. Basically, if you have casual sex frequently, you're in essence turning it into masturbation. It's like it's nothing. And then when you actually do develop some sort of actual connection with another human being, love, for example, or that would be the ideal situation, you're never going to experience, at least it'll take a long time for you to experience what you could have. It's similar to how when guys, and by the way, I masturbate a lot, so this is even knocking myself to some extent. So, like when guys masturbate a whole lot, they tend to have issues in the bedroom, and where they'll have a much harder time getting off than would be the case otherwise. It's a similar idea. You're reinforcing this pure carnal circuitry, and you're taking away what could be something so much more. I shouldn't need to go through a whole lot of detail to explain that sex with love is vastly, vastly better than casual sex, obviously. So you might think that I'm flip flopping and I'm going all over the place. To some extent, I am, but this is very much related. Casual sex and slut shaming are hand in hand. So, one, and by the way, this is not against females specifically. I am across the board on this. To me, when I use the word slut, although oftentimes people just mean females, I'm talking about men and women. All people. If you are purely driven by this hedonistic desire to get off, and that's it, and you use other people as objects to attain that goal, one, you're not a very moral person, and there's no way that you can slip out of that. People try it all the time. They're like, "There's no harm." That's bullshit. It's just simply not true. You're lying to yourself, or you're just wrong, and like you actually believe, or I don't know. Sometimes people are lying. I don't know. It's difficult to tell, but it's in any case, it's just not true. But this is across the board. In general, quality women evaluate men in the exact same way. Like, uh, body count has become like this big deal, and people try to defend it like it means nothing. It does. It shows in general your level of self respect. If you're a very young person, say in your 20s, and you've already had like 10 people or so, that's sad. That's disgusting. That's pathetic. It means that you don't value yourself. You oftentimes it's because the people themselves are extremely insecure and they believe that they're not worthy of love. So they purposefully shut it out and kind of get as close as they believe they can possibly get to it. Sometimes it happens due to like a couple of failed relationships or whatever, but in any case, it's always some sort of psychological fuckery. And oftentimes they aren't even aware of it, and society to some extent is to blame because they constantly push out this liberation, equality, like all this shit that's designed to make it seem like it's harmless. So, I guess to kind of boil this down here, the term slut shaming is a misnomer. It's not a thing. It implies that there's something that there's not something wrong with being a slut when there is. It makes you a an inferior partner. It makes you far more likely to cheat than otherwise because of the way you view sex. Because you consider it like mechanical, as I said. It's like nothing. It's no big deal. You tend to distance yourself from the act and the possible emotional connection associated with the act, as it should be, as we're biologically wired for. And there's a reason for that. So I've went over this many times, but oxytocin is the basically the love chemical. It's released in large quantities when you have sexual intercourse with another person. So when you engage in casual sex and you lie to yourself and you try to act like it's nothing, and then you eventually succeed, you shut it off to a certain extent, and you're damaging yourself. So yeah, I guess that's basically what I want to get out here. Like, I kind of, after the last live stream, and some other people wanted to talk about it a little bit in detail because they were like appalled by some of the things that I said, which I didn't say anything very extreme at all. It's just how it is. So I wanted to kind of break apart this bullshittery associated. Like, The moment you even use that term, you're 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 already stuck in like this bullshit version of reality. Like it's like design propaganda that causes you not to think properly. So, if you disagree, I would, as always, be more than willing to hear you. But if you're just gonna throw out fucking random character attacks like you hear a lot of, this is why you're alone, blah blah blah. I mean, if we're being honest, a vast majority of the people who say this to me are far less desirable than I am. And I don't say that to brag. I say it to kind of show the link that it's more about insecurity than it is them trying to actually uh, come up with an explanation for why I think the way I do. So yeah, I don't have issues in the least with attracting women, obviously. Um, so yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is don't just automatically resort to fucking character attacks because you're not gonna look good. It kind of just shows that you don't have anything, that you just operate emotionally and you just want to fucking defend yourself and that's it. So stick with logic, please. Um, with that being said, I would be more than willing to have this discussion on our next live stream if you want to break it into a bigger deal because this is a subject that's very important in my opinion. I think that it needs to be discussed, and we need to get away from this shit where you're trying to bring up valid points and have an actual conversation, and people constantly try to like strawman your point to turn you into this evil person that you're not. Thank you for your time.